안녕하세요. 이번에 저 진아가 준비한 영상은 영화 배급 유통업자가 말하는 마케팅에 관한 인터뷰 영상입니다. 돈 많이 버세요?
Why do distributors no longer do marketing?
Because they don't care about the movies. There's no passion for the movies. It's just about numbers. They look at a movie, they say, can we make money off of it? And if they can, then they're not emotionally attached. You know, when a filmmaker makes a movie, I mean, I don't want to be, this is a crazy analogy, but it's like having a child. I mean, it's a big deal. Making a movie is a major deal in someone's life. I mean, the amount of time, effort, money that you put into it, the sweat that you put into it, I mean, it's a big deal. And you are so emotionally attached to it, and it's such a major part of who you are in your life because it's such a gigantic commitment and a huge accomplishment. Distributors don't share any of that. They don't have any of that passion. They don't understand any of that pain. As a matter of fact, I have lots of distributor friends. Obviously, I come from that world. And, you know, we're constantly talking at dinner. You know, I say, you guys, you don't even understand. What's there to understand, Jeff? You don't understand how emotionally attached people are and how important it is. And when you just fluff it off and you know, how hurtful it is. Well, it's business, Jeff. And I say, I know it's business. I know it's business, but I've been on both sides of this business. And I understand what filmmakers go through and what they, you know, are dealing with. So I'm not asking you to be, you know, bad business people or anything like that, but they're not emotionally involved and they're not even financially involved these days anymore. So they have no stake in it. Like when I say financially involved, you know, getting a minimum guarantee at least gets them connected and gives them a little bit of risk, but it's hard to get that now, you know, especially a significant one that makes them sweat a little bit. See, very rare you get that. So when there's no financial attachment or no emotional attachment, why should they have to get behind it and put too much effort into it? It's a volume game for them now because a lot of their business is on AVOD platforms where it's basically throw it all up there and see whatever people watch and just take a piece of it. And if you have 100 of them going at the same time, then hopefully the volume will be enough that you can make some real money. But individually, each person's not going to make very much. But they don't care because their business is volume and their business is, I hate to say this because it's going to disturb a lot of filmmakers who are watching this, but I'm going to wager to guess that most distributors don't even watch the movies that they distribute. They might watch 10 minutes of it. Maybe they flip through and watch the first 10, the middle 10, the last 10, just to make sure it's in focus and working. Can you imagine that? Somebody selling your movie who hasn't even watched it? You know, I mean, how disappointing that would be. And they're supposed to talk about it and be passionate about it. They've never seen it. So that's why they don't do marketing, because they don't really care. And that's why a filmmaker has to do it, because they do care and they're going to do it with more passion. Now, maybe not as much skill because they don't do that for a living. And that's why it would be helpful to deal with people who do it for a living. And yeah, will any marketer feel as passionate about the film as the filmmaker? No, of course not. Nobody's going to feel more passionate about their children than the parents, right? But there are people who will feel more passionate than like teachers would feel more passionate about kids than, or coaches or something like that. People are connected the way a filmmaker, but a distributor, they just don't care. That's the main reason.
You know how they say a good artist should have a manager and an agent, but also be looking to book their own work. Don't rely, you'll be waiting by the phone or your email. So is it similar that if you get a distribution deal, if you're lucky enough to have gotten that then you are finding who your audience is, you're going out there and you're actually dealing with them. You're not relying on, well, my distributor just won't, they don't care. It's just business to them.
Once in a while, you'll get lucky and a distributor will get behind it and really try hard, and because they realize that there's potential and that if they put a lot of resources behind it, they'll generate more revenue and be more successful with it once in a while. But I would not take that for granted. So as you say, don't rely on it. If it happens, feel like you're lucky in it, and you won the lottery. Don't rely on it. Figure that even when you get distribution, you're going to have to support the distribution efforts with your marketing and awareness creation as much as you can. And maybe you can't. You know, maybe you can't. And that's why a lot of filmmakers get disappointed with distribution deals, because they say, hey, I gave it to a distributor and they did nothing with it. They stuck it on a couple of platforms. I could have done that myself. They basically did nothing. You know, they didn't, you know. So I say to them, well, what did you do? Well, it's not my job to do it, it's the distributors. I said, well, that's the new norm, the new narrative that I'm talking about. It actually is your job now.
And I've heard that from a lot of actors, filmmakers, writers. That's why I have a manager, but then they don't want to do other things that could actually help propel them, you know.
In the new narrative that I'm talking about, the manager agent thing, and if you want to talk on the talent side, is basically the manager needs to navigate the business elements so that the person doesn't have to learn to become, you know, their own lawyer and business person. The agent just needs to keep an eye on, you know, what the opportunities are, right? But in the distribution world, I mean, what is a producer, writer, director who's making indie film? What's the manager going to do? They're going to negotiate a distribution contract for them. I mean, there's so many people who can do that, and I'm not sure they're going to do it well anyways. And, you know, agents, like, first of all, you know, I think that most indie film people aren't going to get that anyways for two reasons. One is they can't afford it. Like an agent manager, they want to make money. They want retainers. You know, yeah, sure, they're going to take a percentage, but they at least want a retainer. So who can actually afford to have those people on staff, you know, and working for you? And secondly, you know, agent managers need to also, you know, make a living. So hence they want to deal with potentially bigger stuff. And indie films generally aren't big enough. The odd one is, you know, that it will make enough money to pay a 5% commission to an agent or whatever it is. But for the most part, they aren't. That's why it's so hard for indie filmmakers, especially writers, to get representation, because the agents don't want to spend too much time on it because they don't feel there'll be a return on their time.
Can you make a commercially viable movie for $250,000?
So it's interesting, that number gets thrown around a lot these days, $250,000. I used to throw around the number 750. Like that was the number that you needed to spend to make a decent movie. And I always used to say, hey, I'm a decent filmmaker, but remember, I didn't go to film school. You know, I went to law school and business school, so I have the business side down pat. I didn't go to film school, so maybe I don't have the artistic side down pat as much, you know, but when it comes to spending money, I kind of know how that all works. And I used to say as a filmmaker, I think you got to spend at least $750 to make a decent movie, just because you got to give yourself enough time to do it properly. And assuming you want to pay people, you know, I don't have the connections to have people work for free, and I don't really want to ask them to work for free. So I'm not overpaying, or, you know, I'm not paying, nobody's going to get rich, but, you know, I'm paying a fair salary, that type of thing. So just based on my experience, I always felt $750 sort of was the minimum, and, you know, somewhere between $750 and $1.5 million was a decent amount to get a decent movie, like good quality, good production value, you know, costumes, wardrobe, you know, and make the resources you need to deliver a good movie. But a lot of stuff has changed in technology, right? So obviously cameras are cheaper, and you don't need as much gear, sometimes as much staff, you know, crew. Sometimes you get locations are available. I mean, talent has not gone down in price. If anything, it's gone up. So a lot of filmmakers say to me, yeah, I can make a really good movie for $250. And I say, okay, I'm not going to argue with that. But don't think just because you put your heart and soul into it and you tried your best that it makes it into a good movie. The ultimate test is, let's watch the movie and see if it's good. Don't say, hey, I only had $250 to spend and that's the best you can do for $250. That's not going to fly in the real world. Nobody's going to care. They're going to say, okay, nice try, but we don't want to spend our time and money watching your movie. It's not like, oh, wow, let's watch the best movie that was made for $250. It doesn't work that way. So if you can really look at, lots of people have done it. Lots of people have made movies for less than $100,000. We know that. There's these stories and myths and legends out there of all these great films that were made for, you know, very low budgets. I think those are anomalies. I think they happen far and few between. But if you're a great filmmaker and you got a good crew and the chemistry's right and the story's right and the acting's right and everything happens, then what the heck? You know, as I say to all my clients, the customers out there i.e. the viewers, nobody's going to ask you how much you spent on your movie. All they're going to ask you, they're just going to look at your movie and say, is it good or bad? They don't care how much you spent. And by the way, when people talk about how much they spend, they lie anyways. Everybody always says they spend 10 times more than they did. And some of it's real because remember, they're not getting paid. So, people say, oh, I made a film for $50,000. And then I say, great, how many hours did you put? Oh, I put 2,000 hours of my time in. Did you include that? No. How much would you make an hour? $100. Oh, so that's $20,000 of time that you didn't include in your scenario. So your film wasn't 50,000, it was 70,000, because if somebody was going to make the same film, they'd have to make it for 70,000. If I did my math right, I didn't mean 200,000, I meant 20,000, time of their time. So people don't factor that in. So the numbers are always skewed anyways about how much somebody spent on a movie. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much somebody spent. The only thing that matters is that the movie's good. So I applaud anybody who can make a great movie for a little amount of money. And by the way, the people who say to me, I can make a movie for $250, I say, maybe you should be making some of my movies, because I'd be making a lot more money if we were delivering my movies for $250, if you could deliver them. Oh, well, you should give me a chance, Jeff. And I said, I don't trust that it can happen. And maybe I'm skewed. Maybe I think you need, these resources and everything like that. So I do believe that there are people out there who are making really good stuff for $250 and maybe cheaper. But don't think because you spent $250 that the contest is not who made the best movie for $250. The contest is, did you make a great movie, and it doesn't matter what you made it for. Because if you didn't make a great movie, I don't care if you spent $2.5 million. If you didn't make a great movie, you're not in the game. Your movie's not selling. The movie's got to be good. And I know we didn't talk about that before when I talk about distribution, but remember I said I'm going to check that box that you made a great movie. You got to make a good movie. Fair is fair, right? If you want somebody to pay and spend their time watching your movie and pay to watch it, give them some value. Give them some entertainment value. Give them a good movie.